The ballroom was glittering with gold. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars, and the air carried the scent of expensive wine and old money. The city's elite had gathered. Business tycoons, politicians, celebrities, each one smiling for cameras, each one pretending the night was nothing but glamour. But beneath the luxury, something sinister waited. The billionaire at the center of attention, Michael Sterling, was a man used to power. He built empires, bought companies, and controlled headlines. Tonight was supposed to be another victory. A charity gala celebrating his latest donation. Yet as he entered the hall, he had no idea that every step he took was leading him closer to a trap. In the shadows, someone else knew the truth. Not a guard, not a business partner, not even one of his rivals. It was a girl, barely 18, the daughter of a maid who worked in that very hotel. She wasn't supposed to be in the hall. She wasn't supposed to know anything, but she had seen too much. She had overheard the whispers. She had watched the men in black suits exchange looks that didn't match their smiles. And she knew one thing with terrifying certainty. If Michael Sterling wasn't warned tonight, he wouldn't survive until morning. Her hands trembled as she folded a small piece of paper. She had written only a few words, but they carried the weight of life and death. Don't panic. It's a trap, the music swelled. The billionaire lifted his glass. The girl pushed through the crowd, heart pounding in her chest, and slipped the note into his palm. And in that moment, before he even read it, his life had already changed forever. Michael Sterling lived a life most people only saw in magazines. Private jets, luxury yachts, towering skyscrapers with his name carved into glass. To the public, he was untouchable, a symbol of success and security. But the truth about power is simple. The higher you rise, the more enemies wait in the shadows. That night, Michael walked into the Sterling Grand Hotel, a property he owned but rarely visited. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted his name. He smiled, waved, and entered the ballroom with the calm confidence of a man who believed he controlled everything around him. Yet he didn't notice the small details. The waiter who wasn't really part of the staff, the guard whose eyes never left him, the subtle shift in the music as the event began. But someone else noticed. Her name was Clara, daughter of Elena, the maid who had worked at the hotel for over a decade. Clara had grown up in the back corridors, sneaking peeks at the wealthy guests, watching the glittering world that always felt out of reach. She wasn't supposed to be at the gala, but she had been helping her mother prepare tables earlier in the day. That's when she heard them. Two men in tailored suits standing too close to the service hallway, whispering words that froze her in place. When he makes the toast, we move. The exits are covered. No mistakes. At first, Clara thought she had misunderstood, but then she saw the small black case one of them carried. It wasn't wine. It wasn't gifts. It was something else, something dangerous. Her heart raced. She knew she couldn't tell her mother. If Elena panicked, she would be fired or worse. Security? No, what if they were part of it? Clara had seen enough movies, heard enough stories, to know one truth. When powerful men set a trap, they often controlled everything around it, so she made a choice. She tore a page from the small notebook she carried for her drawings, grabbed a pen, and wrote the only word she thought the billionaire would understand quickly enough. Don't panic. It's a trap. As the gala unfolded, Clara watched from the edges, every second feeling like a lifetime. Michael Sterling shook hands with mayors, laughed with CEOs, kissed babies for the cameras. He was living a dream, unaware that it was about to turn into a nightmare. Clara knew she had only one chance. She rehearsed it in her head. Walk forward, blend with the crowd, slip the note, disappear. If she failed, she'd be caught, and nobody would ever know the truth. The moment came faster than she expected. Michael raised his glass. The music softened. Silence rippled through the crowd as everyone turned toward him, and in that silence, Clara moved. Step by step, she crossed the ballroom. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure people could hear it. The men in black suits scanned the room, their eyes sharp, but she kept her head down. Just another guest's daughter, perhaps. Nobody important. When she reached him, Michael didn't even notice her at first. He was focused on his speech, the cameras, the flashing lights. Clara slipped her hand forward, pressed the folded paper into his palm, and whispered with a voice so low only he could hear, "Read it, please." Then she walked away, vanishing into the crowd before anyone could stop her. Michael frowned. He wasn't used to strangers interrupting him. He opened the note under the table, hidden from the cameras. At first he thought it was some silly prank, but as he read the words, his chest tightened. His eyes scanned the room, and suddenly he noticed the details he had ignored before. The guard by the exit who wasn't smiling. The man near the stage gripping something under his jacket. The strange glances exchanged across the room. For the first time in years, Michael Sterling felt something he had almost forgotten. Fear. He looked back toward the crowd, searching for the girl who had given him the note, but she was gone. Only her words remained, burning in his mind. Don't panic. It's a trap. Michael Sterling's pulse quickened as he folded the note back into his hand. He slipped it into his pocket with a practiced smile, the kind of mask every billionaire wears when the cameras are watching. To the crowd he looked calm, composed, even charming. But inside the words burned like fire. Don't panic. It's a trap. He glanced at his watch, pretending to adjust the cuff of his sleeve but really scanning the room again. This time he saw everything differently. The man by the exit, his stance was too rigid, his eyes never shifting away from Michael. Another near the buffet. He wasn't eating, wasn't drinking, only watching. And the case near the stage, the one Clara had seen, sat unopened on the floor, close enough to the microphone where Michael would soon step to speak. Michael had spent decades in boardrooms negotiating deals worth billions. He had faced hostile takeovers, rival corporations, even political storms, but nothing had ever felt like this. Nothing had ever made his throat tighten with the taste of fear. He raised his glass and gave the toast anyway. His voice didn't crack, his hands didn't tremble. The audience laughed, applauded, clinked glasses together. They had no idea that beneath the surface of their laughter, a deadly game was being played. When the toast ended, Michael leaned casually toward his security chief, a tall man named Harris who had protected him for years. "Check the exits," he murmured, his smile never fading. Harris frowned. "Is there a problem, sir?" "Just a precaution," Michael said. His tone was light, almost playful, but his eyes told another story. Harris gave a small nod and moved away. Michael exhaled slowly. Whoever had planned this, they were professionals. He couldn't risk making the wrong move. If he panicked, if he rushed, the entire ballroom could become a cage. Hundreds of people, innocent guests, his employees, the press, would be caught in the chaos. The note had saved him, but now it trapped him too. Every second felt like a countdown. He tried to find the girl again. She was nowhere. He scanned the edges of the room, the corridors, even the balcony above. But the maid's daughter had vanished as if swallowed by the crowd, and yet her presence lingered. A whisper in his ear, a warning he couldn't ignore. Then he noticed something. A man near the stage tapped his watch twice and gave a slight nod toward another. It was a signal, subtle but sharp. Michael's chest tightened. The trap was closer than he had imagined. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. With the confidence of a man who owned the building, Michael walked toward the stage. Every step was measured, his expression calm, though his heart pounded so loudly it seemed to echo in his ears. He shook a few hands, offered a smile here and there, but his eyes never left the black case by the podium. When he reached it, he bent down slightly, pretending to tie his shoe. His fingers brushed the edge of the case. It was heavier than it looked, locked with a code and positioned too carefully to be random. He straightened quickly, aware that the men were watching. Danger was real. Immediate. Harris returned, face pale. "Sir," he whispered, "2 exits are blocked. Men are stationed outside." "I don't like this." Michael nodded once, hiding the exchange behind a broad smile for the cameras. "Understood. Stay close." The band struck up another tune. Couples began to dance. The glitter of the gala sparkled on, oblivious to the storm brewing within its walls. Michael's mind raced. He thought about his empire, his family, everything he had built. Was it all about to collapse in one night? And then, as if fate itself was moving pieces on the board, he saw her again, Clara. She was half hidden near the kitchen doors, clutching a tray she didn't belong to, her eyes darting across the room. When their gazes met, Michael felt a surge of certainty. She knew more. She wasn't just warning him, she was guiding him. But before he could move, the lights flickered. It was only for a second, just a hiccup in the electricity, but in that brief darkness he felt the entire room shift. When the chandeliers blazed back to life, the man near the stage was gone. The case remained. The air felt tighter, heavier, like the breath before an explosion. Michael's instincts screamed. He turned back toward Clara, but she had disappeared into the service corridor. He wanted to follow, but Harris caught his arm. "Sir, we need to move you now." "No," Michael whispered. His voice was calm, but his decision was firm. "If we rush, they'll trigger it. Stay still, watch." And then he realized the note wasn't just a warning. It was a command. Don't panic. If he panicked, they won. If he stayed calm, maybe, just maybe, he could find a way out alive. The music played on. Laughter filled the hall, but Michael Sterling no longer heard it. His world had shrunk to a note in his pocket, a girl in the shadows and a trap waiting to spring. The billionaire forced another smile, but inside, every second was agony. Somewhere in the shadows, the trap was tightening, and only the maid's daughter knew how to stop it. But where was she now? The music played on, but to Michael Sterling it sounded like a cruel disguise. Beneath the violins and laughter, he heard only danger. The note in his pocket felt heavier than any fortune he had ever earned. Don't panic. It's a trap. Those words guided him now like a compass pointing toward survival. He forced himself to stay calm, to blend in, to act like nothing was wrong. That was his power, appearances. For decades he had hidden behind smiles, handshakes, and polished words. Tonight that performance would decide whether he lived or died, but he needed answers, and the only person who had them had vanished. The maid's daughter, Clara. Michael excused himself from the cluster of politicians near the stage, his smile unwavering. "Enjoy the night," he said, his voice smooth. Then he moved toward the service corridor where he had last seen her. Harris shadowed him closely, one hand resting inside his jacket where his weapon lay hidden. As Michael crossed the ballroom, he noticed more details. Too many men standing still, too many eyes tracking his movements. He was walking across a chessboard, and every square was dangerous. He reached the service doors and slipped inside. Instantly, the sound of music and laughter dulled. The air changed. The hallway smelled of bleach and old carpets. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Here there was no glamour, no cameras, only silence and shadows. "Stay alert," Harris whispered. Michael nodded. His eyes scanned the corridor, searching for her. He wanted to call out, but his instincts told him silence was safer. He moved forward, footsteps echoing softly against the tiled floor. And then he saw her. Clara stood halfway down the corridor, pressed against the wall, breathing fast. When she spotted him, her eyes widened with fear. Not just fear for herself, but fear for him. She motioned quickly, urging him closer. Michael hurried to her side. "You wrote the note?" She nodded, voice trembling. "They're going to kill you. They're waiting for the signal. You can't go back in there." Michael leaned in, keeping his voice low. "Who are they?" "I don't know," she whispered, "but I heard them. They said when you lift your glass for the second toast, that's when it happens. They've blocked the exits. Nobody will get out." Michael's jaw tightened. "The second toast." He glanced at Harris, whose hand gripped his weapon harder. Clara looked down the corridor nervously. "They know I heard them. If they see me with you, they'll know I told you. We don't have much time." Michael studied her. Just a maid's daughter. Barely an adult, trembling, eyes wide with terror. She had no reason to risk herself for him, yet she had. And in that moment, he realized something rare. For the first time in years, someone had helped him without wanting anything in return. "Why warn me?" he asked quietly. Clara swallowed hard. "Because you're human. Because nobody else would. And because if I stay silent, I'll never forgive myself." Michael felt a surge of something he hadn't felt in decades. Gratitude. Harris cut in. "Sir, we need to extract you now." Michael shook his head. "If we run, they'll detonate whatever's in that case. Hundreds will die. I won't have that blood on my hands." Clara looked between them, her fear growing. "Then you need proof. If you can show your guards or the police, they'll have no choice but to act." Michael's mind raced. Proof. He needed to confirm what was inside the case, who the men were working for, and how to stop them before the second toast. Time was slipping like sand through his fingers. Suddenly, footsteps echoed at the end of the corridor. Voices followed. Clara's eyes widened. "They're coming!" Michael grabbed her wrist gently. "This way." He pulled her down another hallway, Harris covering their rear. They moved quickly, weaving through service corridors meant for staff, not guests. Every turn felt like another step deeper into a labyrinth. At last, they reached a supply closet. Harris yanked the door open and gestured them inside. They slipped in, closing the door behind them. The space was cramped, filled with brooms, boxes, and the faint smell of detergent. In the dim light, Clara pressed her back against the wall, trying to steady her breathing. Michael crouched in front of her. "Listen carefully," he said. "What exactly did you hear?" Clara replayed the whispers. "When he makes the second toast, we move, and the exits are covered. No mistakes." "That's all I caught." Michael thought fast. The case by the stage, it had to be the centerpiece, something designed to trigger at a specific signal. The men near the exits weren't guards. They were soldiers waiting to strike. For years, Michael had been accused of making enemies. Competitors he crushed, politicians he outmaneuvered, partners he betrayed. Any one of them could be behind this, but he didn't have time to figure out who. Survival came first. "We need to open that case," he said. Harris frowned. "Impossible. It's locked. And tampering with it in front of everyone will cause panic." "Exactly," Michael said quietly. "That's what they want, panic, chaos. I can't let that happen." The silence stretched. Clara hugged herself tightly. "If you go back out there, they'll kill you." Michael met her gaze. "Then I'll have to be smarter than them." Suddenly, the hallway outside filled with footsteps. Voices grew louder. Harris drew his weapon, eyes sharp. Someone was sweeping the corridors, searching for them. Clara's lips trembled. "They know." Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm. Remember your own words. Don't panic." And for the first time that night, Clara gave a tiny, brave nod. The doorknob rattled. Shadows moved under the door. Harris raised his weapon, ready. Michael clenched his fists, preparing for the worst, and then silence. The footsteps retreated. The voices faded. Whoever was outside had moved on. Michael exhaled, tension dripping from his shoulders. But he knew this was only the beginning. The second toast was drawing closer. He looked at Clara. "If I don't make it through this, you need to tell the police everything you know." Her eyes filled with tears. "No, you're going to survive. You have to." Michael gave a faint smile, though inside dread coiled tighter. He had built empires with logic, numbers, and steel. But tonight, His life rested on the courage of a maid's daughter and a note scribbled on paper. The second toast was minutes away. The trap was tightening, and Michael Sterling knew, if he didn't act now, the ballroom would become a graveyard. But how do you fight an enemy you can't even see? The ballroom glittered as if nothing was wrong. Guests laughed, the band played. Waiters weaved through the crowd with silver trays. But Michael Sterling knew better. Every sound, every movement was now a threat. Somewhere in that room a trap was waiting, and the second toast would be the trigger. Hidden in the supply closet, Michael steadied his breath. Clara stood beside him, clutching her arms tightly, while Harris watched the door with his weapon ready. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint thrum of music seeping through the walls. Michael finally spoke, his voice low but determined. "We can't stay here. When the second toast begins, it won't matter where we're hiding. If that case is what I think it is, the whole ballroom could be torn apart." Clara's eyes widened. "So what do we do?" Michael's gaze sharpened. "We go back. We get closer to that case, and we find a way to stop them before they move." Harris frowned. "Sir, with respect, that's suicide. They're expecting you to walk into it. They're expecting a billionaire who panics," Michael said quietly. "They're not expecting me to walk in calm as if I don't know a thing. That's our only advantage." Clara bit her lip. She wanted to protest, but the conviction in his voice silenced her. The three of them slipped back into the corridor, blending into the shadows. They followed a narrow passage that opened near the back of the ballroom. From there, Michael could see the guests twirling on the dance floor, champagne flutes clinking under the glow of chandeliers. The case was still there by the podium, untouched, waiting like a coiled serpent. Michael forced his steps steady as he re-entered the ballroom. Harris shadowed him while Clara hung back, disappearing into the edges of the crowd. Her presence was a silent anchor, reminding him that fear was real, but courage was stronger. As Michael moved through the crowd, he caught sight of the men again. Their eyes tracked him, cold and calculating. One near the exit adjusted his jacket, revealing the glint of metal beneath. Another spoke quietly into an earpiece. They weren't amateurs. This was orchestrated, precise. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone, smiling. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention once more. Tonight we raise our glasses not just to generosity, but to legacy. And who better to lead us than Mr. Michael Sterling himself?" Applause thundered through the room. All eyes turned to him. Michael's chest tightened. The moment had come. Michael's chest tightened. The moment had come. He walked to the podium, every step echoing like a countdown. Harris positioned himself behind, eyes scanning for threats. The case lay only a foot away. Michael glanced at it briefly. Its lock gleamed under the lights, a silent promise of destruction. He gripped the microphone, his smile effortless, his voice smooth. "Friends, partners, honored guests," he began. "Tonight is about more than wealth. It is about what we do with it. It is about the lives we touch, the future we build, the hope we create together." The audience leaned in, captivated by his practiced charisma, but Michael wasn't speaking to them. His words were smoke, a distraction, a mask for the storm brewing inside. As he spoke, he noticed Clara at the far edge of the room. She wasn't clapping, wasn't smiling. Instead, she pointed subtly toward the balcony above. Michael followed her gesture with his eyes, and then he saw it. A man crouched in the shadows, his rifle angled toward the stage. Michael's heart lurched. The case wasn't the only threat. The toast wasn't the only trigger. This was a layered trap, a web designed so that no matter what happened, he wouldn't escape alive. He tightened his grip on the microphone, his voice never wavering. "So tonight, when we lift our glasses, let us remember, true wealth is not measured by what we keep but by what we give." Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Glasses were lifted. The signal was seconds away. Michael leaned slightly toward Harris, his words hidden by applause. "Balcony, left side, shooter." Harris's eyes flicked upward. His jaw clenched. "On it." But even as Harris moved, the man on the balcony adjusted his aim. Michael raised his glass slowly, buying time. The guests mirrored him, oblivious. He could almost hear the tick of a clock the moment before chaos. Then, Clara moved. From the side of the room, she grabbed a tray from a passing waiter and hurled it upward. The metal clattered against the railing, startling the shooter. His aim faltered, the shot went wide, and panic rippled through the crowd as the sound of the gun cracked across the hall. Screams erupted. Glasses shattered. The orchestra stopped mid-note. Chaos had begun. Harris fired back, pinning the shooter behind the balcony wall. Guests ducked under tables, some rushing toward the exits only to be blocked by the waiting men. The trap had sprung, but not the way its architects intended. Michael dropped the glass and dove behind the podium. The case was right beside him, its lock gleaming in the fractured light. He knew it was now or never. He grabbed it. It was heavier than he imagined, the weight of something dangerous. Harris covered him, bullets whizzing through the air. "Sir, we need to move," Harris shouted, but Michael shook his head. "If we don't deal with this, they'll set it off. No one gets out alive." Clara scrambled across the floor, her eyes wide with fear but also resolve. She reached him, crouching low. "We have to get it open. I think I saw one of them enter the code earlier." It was 4 numbers. 2 taps, a pause, then 2 more. Michael's mind raced. He had watched the men all night without realizing it, but Clara had seen what he hadn't. He looked at the lock. 4 digits. Time running out, chaos swirling. He entered the sequence she described, hands steady despite the storm around him. The lock clicked. The case opened. Inside, nestled in black foam, was a device with blinking red lights. A bomb. Michael's blood ran cold. The trap was no longer a rumor, no longer a fear. It was real, ticking, alive in his hands, and now he had only minutes to stop it. The blinking red light seared itself into Michael Sterling's vision. Each flash felt like the beating of a monstrous heart. He had spent his life building empires, fighting corporate wars, and buying his way out of problems. But no amount of wealth, no clever contract, could outbid the truth sitting before him. A bomb primed to destroy everything in its path. Clara gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Harris's jaw clenched as he knelt beside Michael, weapon angled toward the balcony. Gunfire still cracked overhead, glass shattering as guests screamed and scrambled. The ballroom that once glittered with gold was now fractured with chaos. Michael forced himself to breathe. "How much time?" Harris shook his head. "No timer. It's remote triggered. That's why the men are stationed by the exits. They're waiting for the command." Clara's voice trembled. "They'll set it off if they see us tampering with it." Michael's mind spun. Remote triggered. That meant the bomb was useless without a signal. Whoever held that trigger was the true enemy, the real puppeteer behind the curtain. He looked at Harris. "Can we jam it?" "Not with what we have," Harris replied grimly. "But if we can find the receiver inside, we might disconnect it manually. That buys us time." Michael glanced at Clara. Her wide eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "You saw the men. You heard them. Do you recognize who was giving orders?" She shook her head, then hesitated. "One of them, the tall one near the east exit. He wasn't just watching the crowd. Everyone else looked at him before moving. He's the leader." Michael followed her gaze. Through the chaos, he spotted the man. Tall, sharp suit, cold eyes. His hand was hidden in his pocket, and Michael knew instinctively what was there. The detonator. Everything narrowed to one truth. If that man pressed the button, the device in front of him would become fire, steel, and death. Michael closed the case slowly, hiding the blinking light from panicked eyes around them. "We need to get him." Clara's face paled. "You can't go near him." Michael gave her a faint smile. "I don't plan to." He looked at Harris. "Can you take the shot?" Harris's eyes tracked the leader. "Too many people. One wrong move and I hit a guest. I need a cleaner angle." Gunfire erupted again from the balcony as the hidden shooter reappeared, forcing Harris to duck. Clara let out a startled cry, clutching Michael's arm. He steadied her with a firm grip. "Listen to me," he said, his voice calm, commanding. "You've already saved me once tonight, but now I need more. Watch him. If he makes a move, if he even twitches toward that detonator, you tell me. Understand?" Clara nodded, her fear swallowed by determination. The seconds dragged like hours. Michael crouched by the podium, mind racing. He thought about every business deal, every boardroom battle. He had always won by predicting his opponent's move before they made it. Tonight would be no different. The leader by the exit scanned the room, his cold gaze sweeping over the chaos. He pulled the detonator halfway from his pocket, thumb hovering over the switch. Clara whispered urgently, "He's going to press it." Michael moved before Harris could. He grabbed a champagne bottle from the table beside him and hurled it across the ballroom. It shattered against a column just feet from the man, startling him enough that his thumb slipped back. Gasps echoed. The crowd ducked again. Harris seized the opening. He fired a precise shot, the bullet slamming into the man's shoulder. The detonator flew from his hand, skittering across the polished floor. Clara cried out, "There!" Michael lunged, sliding across the ground. He reached the device before anyone else, his fingers closing around the cold metal. The leader roared in pain, clutching his shoulder while his men surged forward, weapons drawn. Harris returned fire, the ballroom erupting in chaos. Guests screamed louder, trampling each other in a desperate rush for cover. Michael gripped the detonator tightly, his knuckles white. Relief surged through him. One threat neutralized, but when he looked back at the case, the blinking red light continued. Clara's voice trembled. "It's still armed." Michael's stomach sank. "Of course it is. The detonator isn't the only trigger. They've built redundancies." The realization was crushing. Even without the leader, the device was alive, waiting. Suddenly, the balcony shooter fired again, the bullet grazing Harris's arm. He hissed in pain, dropping briefly to one knee. Michael shielded Clara instinctively, pulling her close. The device, the detonator, the men, everything was spiraling out of control. He forced himself to think. Logic, strategy, always strategy. He opened the detonator, his fingers steady. Inside were wires, circuits, a transmitter. He recognized enough to know what mattered. The signal. If he destroyed it, the remote connection would die. He slammed it against the marble floor. Sparks flew. The transmitter cracked, its antenna snapping in two. The blinking light on the bomb didn't stop, but Michael felt a sliver of hope. One line cut. One weapon weakened. Clara clutched his arm. What now? Michael's eyes hardened. Now we finish it. He looked at Harris. We need that case out of here. Away from the people. Harris winced, gripping his bleeding arm. It's too risky. We move it, it could trigger. Michael met his eyes. Leaving it here guarantees death. Moving it gives us a chance. Harris hesitated, then gave a grim nod. Then let's move. He holstered his weapon, grabbed the case, and lifted it carefully. The blinking light pulsed faster now, as if mocking them. Clara gasped. Don't panic, Michael whispered, echoing her own words back to her. Together, the three of them moved toward the service doors. Bullets ricocheted around them, but Michael kept moving, his body shielding Clara. Every step was agony, every breath thick with tension. Finally, they burst into the service corridor, slamming the doors behind them. The music, the screams, the chaos of the ballroom faded. Now it was only them, the bomb and the narrowing window of time. Harris set the case down gently on the floor. The red light blinked faster, urgent, hungry. Michael crouched in front of it, sweat beading his forehead. We need to disable it. Right here, right now. Clara knelt beside him, her small hands trembling but her eyes fierce. Tell me what to do. Michael looked at her. This Maid's daughter who had become his only ally. He felt a surge of determination. For once, survival wasn't about money, power, or control. It was about trust, and trust, he realized, was more powerful than fear. The bomb blinked faster, seconds slipping away. Michael Sterling's empire meant nothing now. Because in the end, it wasn't billions that would save him. It was the courage of a Maid's daughter. The corridor was silent except for the pulsing blink of the red light. Each flash cast a faint glow against the walls, a cruel reminder that time was slipping away. Michael Sterling crouched before the bomb, sweat dripping down his temples, his heartbeat drumming in rhythm with the device. Clara knelt beside him, her small hands trembling but steadying as she forced herself to breathe. She had never imagined this. Herself, the daughter of a maid, sitting inches from a weapon that could end hundreds of lives. Yet here she was, refusing to run, refusing to leave him. Harris stood guard at the door, weapon raised despite the blood seeping through his sleeve. He kept his eyes locked on the shadows beyond the corridor. The attackers weren't finished. They would regroup. They would come. Michael leaned closer to the device. It was compact, expertly built, wires crossing in a deadly web. This wasn't something cobbled together by amateurs. It was military grade, designed for precision and destruction. He whispered, half to himself, half to Clara. They built it to terrify. Every wire looks like a trap. One wrong move and it's over. Clara's voice wavered but held firm. Then we don't make the wrong move. Michael glanced at her. In her eyes he saw no wealth, no calculation, only courage. The kind of courage money couldn't buy. He studied the bomb, forcing his brain to strip away fear. Logic. Always logic. The blinking light was tied to the detonator circuit. He traced the wires with his eyes, noticing the faint markings. Red to power, blue to receiver, green to failsafe. But two wires, yellow and black, were twisted together in a way that made his stomach sink. It was a trap within a trap. Harris's voice broke the silence. Sir, movement. They're coming. Michael didn't look up. Buy me time. Harris nodded, tightening his grip on the gun. Clara leaned closer. What do you need me to do? Michael pointed at the wires. Watch my hands. If I falter, remind me what I'm cutting. Sometimes panic makes you forget. She nodded quickly, determination sharpening her fear. The footsteps grew louder. Shouts echoed down the corridor. Harris fired a shot, the sound reverberating like thunder. The attackers shouted back, their boots pounding against the tiles. Michael ignored it. The world narrowed to wires, circuits, and the blinking red pulse. He reached for the cutters Harris had pulled from a nearby toolbox, his fingers slick with sweat. Clara's voice whispered steady encouragement. Red is power, blue is receiver, green is failsafe, yellow and black. Wrong combination. Michael exhaled. Exactly. If I cut the wrong one, it triggers instantly. The attackers slammed against the service door, rattling it on its hinges. Harris fired again, gritting his teeth against the pain in his arm. Sir, I can't hold them much longer. Michael's hands hovered over the wires. His instincts screamed at him to rush, but he forced himself calm. One breath. One choice. He cut the red wire. The light blinked faster. Clara gasped. It's speeding up. Michael's chest tightened, but he kept his voice steady. That's the power cycle. I disrupted it. Now we find the trigger. The door crashed halfway open, bullets ricocheting off the metal frame. Harris fired back, his voice a roar of defiance. They're coming through! Michael focused harder. The blue wire hummed faintly, a receiver line. He grabbed it, steadying his breath. Clara, hold my wrist. If I hesitate, you remind me why we're here. Her small hand gripped his tightly. Because if you don't cut it, everyone dies. He nodded once and sliced the blue wire. The light froze. For one terrifying second, everything stopped. No blink, no sound, just silence. Then it resumed. Slower now, like a heart weakened but still beating. Clara whispered, "It's working. You're shutting it down." But Michael wasn't convinced. His eyes fell to the twisted yellow and black wires. They were the last ones, coiled together like serpents waiting to strike. One was harmless, the other a failsafe that would trigger everything if cut. The attackers forced the door wider. Harris staggered, bleeding heavily, firing his last rounds. "Sir, decide now." Michael's mind raced. The markings were faint, worn, almost intentional in their deceit. He remembered Clara's words, "Don't panic." That was the key. Traps were built on fear. If he second-guessed himself, he would lose. He closed his eyes for half a second, picturing the circuitry in his mind. Every path, every signal. Then he opened them with clarity. He cut the yellow wire. The light flickered once, twice, and died. Silence. Clara gasped, tears spilling down her cheeks. "You did it. You actually did it." Michael exhaled, his body sagging with relief. The bomb lay lifeless at his feet. But there was no time to celebrate. The attackers burst through the door, guns raised, fury etched on their faces. Harris dropped to one knee, out of ammunition, his weapon useless. Michael shielded Clara, ready for the worst, and then sirens. The sound wailed through the building as armed security and police stormed the corridor. Harris had triggered the silent alarm earlier, and now reinforcements flooded in. Bullets flew, shouts filled the air, and one by one the attackers were subdued. The leader, bleeding from his shoulder, was dragged down the hallway, his cold eyes never leaving Michael. "This isn't over," he hissed. Michael stared back, his expression calm, unshaken. "Yes, it is." Clara clung to his arm, trembling but alive. For the first time all night, Michael allowed himself a small, genuine smile. Not the smile of a billionaire, not the mask of a tycoon, but the gratitude of a man who had been saved by courage. The corridor was littered with debris, the bomb disarmed, the attackers restrained. Harris leaned against the wall, exhausted but alive. Clara wiped her tears, her hands still shaking. Michael looked at her and spoke softly. "You saved me. Not the guards, not the money, you." Clara shook her head. "I just did what I had to." But Michael knew better. In his world, people acted for power, for profit, for advantage. She had risked everything for nothing in return. That, he realized, was true wealth. The sirens faded as order slowly returned. Michael glanced at the lifeless bomb one last time, then at the girl beside him. The night was over, but the story was only beginning. The bomb was dead, the attackers captured, but the billionaire's mind was restless, because sometimes survival isn't the end of the story. It's the start of a new one. The ballroom was in ruins. Broken glass glittered across the marble floor. Tables overturned, banners torn. The guests were gone, escorted out by trembling staff and police officers. What had begun as a night of glamour ended as a battlefield of shadows and fear. Michael Sterling stood at the edge of the wreckage, his tailored suit torn, his face pale but composed. Cameras would later capture the aftermath, but for now, the world outside didn't know the truth. Only those who had been in that room understood how close they had come to death. Harris leaned against a wall, paramedics wrapping his arm. His eyes were heavy with exhaustion yet sharp with pride. He had stood his ground until the very end. Clara sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, her hands still trembling. The hotel staff whispered about her, some in disbelief, some in awe. Michael walked toward her slowly, the chaos fading with each step. When she looked up, their eyes met, hers filled with fear and exhaustion, his with gratitude and something more, respect. "You should be with your mother," Michael said softly. Clara shook her head. "She doesn't know what happened. I don't even know how to tell her." Michael crouched before her, lowering himself in a way he rarely did for anyone. "You saved my life tonight, not just mine. Hundreds of others. That kind of courage is rare. It deserves to be known." Clara looked away, her voice small. "I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because it was right." Her words struck him harder than any bullet could. In his world, people acted for advantage, for profit, for survival. But this girl, this maid's daughter, had risked everything without expecting a single thing in return. Before he could reply, 2 officers dragged the leader of the attackers into the ballroom. His suit was torn, blood staining his shoulder where Harris's bullet had struck. His cold eyes flicked across the room until they landed on Michael. Even bound in handcuffs, he radiated menace. The officer barked, "We'll take him downtown. He refuses to give a name." The man smirked, his voice low and sharp. "You think this ends with me? You're a fool, Sterling. Tonight was only a message. Next time you won't be so lucky." Michael stepped closer, his jaw tight, his voice calm. "You underestimated me. You underestimated her." He glanced toward Clara, whose frightened eyes met the leader's glare. The man chuckled darkly. A maid's daughter? That's your savior? How poetic. But remember, every empire has enemies and yours is crumbling. Michael's eyes hardened. Empires can fall, but humanity doesn't. The police dragged the man away, his threats echoing faintly down the hall. For a long moment, silence lingered. Then Michael turned back to Clara. She looked overwhelmed, caught between relief and fear. Why did he say that? She asked quietly. Michael exhaled. Because I've made enemies. Too many, perhaps. But tonight showed me something I forgot. Sometimes the smallest act of courage can topple the largest threat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the folded note she had given him hours earlier. The words were still clear, the ink smudged by sweat. Don't panic. It's a trap. He held it out to her. This, he said softly, is worth more than any contract, any fortune. Because these words saved lives. Clara hesitated, then took the paper back, clutching it tightly. Paramedics urged Michael to be checked, but he waved them away. Instead, he sat beside Clara. What will you do now? She shrugged, her voice uncertain. Go back to my life, I guess. People like me don't belong in worlds like yours. Michael shook his head. You belong in any world you choose. Don't ever believe otherwise. Her eyes shimmered with tears. For the first time that night, she allowed herself to breathe without fear. The police began clearing the last of the debris. Harris approached, his arm bandaged, his voice firm despite the exhaustion. Sir, we should get you out. Reporters are circling the building. Once word spreads, this story will explode. Michael stood, offering a hand to Clara. She hesitated, then accepted it. He helped her to her feet, steadying her as she rose. As they walked out of the ruined ballroom together, Michael realized something profound. His billions hadn't protected him. His empire hadn't saved him. A girl with nothing but courage had done what all his power could not. Outside, the night air was cool against his face. Flashing lights from police cars painted the street in red and blue. Reporters shouted questions, cameras flashed. But Michael kept walking, Clara by his side. For once, he didn't care about appearances. He stopped on the steps of the hotel and looked at her. Clara, you changed everything tonight. I don't know how to repay that. She shook her head quickly. You don't need to, just remember me. Michael smiled faintly. I won't forget. Not ever. He turned toward the reporters, his voice steady. Tonight could have been a tragedy, but because of bravery, because of someone who had nothing but heart, we are standing here alive. That's the story you should tell. The cameras flashed brighter. Reporters shouted louder. But Michael had said what mattered. He looked at Clara one last time, and in that moment the distance between Billionaire and Maid's daughter vanished. The night had begun with a trap. It ended with survival, and a bond neither of them would ever forget. Later, as Michael sat in his car, the folded note still in his pocket, he realized something chilling. The attackers hadn't expected him to survive. The trap had been too perfect, too calculated, which meant only one thing. Someone close to him had wanted him dead. He looked out the window at the flashing lights fading in the distance, his jaw tightening. Clara had saved his life, but the war behind the trap was just beginning. The note saved him tonight. But tomorrow new traps would come, and the only question left was, who had set the first one? In the end, it wasn't wealth, power, or influence that saved the billionaire's life. It was the courage of a maid's daughter, and a single note that whispered the truth. But if this trap was only the beginning, what dangers wait in the shadows next? Stay with us, because real life writes the most unbelievable stories. And if you don't want to miss them, make sure you subscribe and join us for the next chapter.